Good afternoon to those of you at Legacy Willow Bend and Legacy Midtown Park. I'm Rabbi Michael Tevye Cohen of the Legacy Senior Communities. We're going to be conducting a Tu B'Shvat Seder. Will be about an hour long with stories and little bits of our Jewish tradition and a context to talk about the meaning of Tu B'Shvat. I hope you'll enjoy it. I think you will. But we're going to bring you some of the exciting work of the Arava Institute, which is part of Ben Gurion University. The Tu B'Shvat is the 15th of the month of Shvat, and it's commonly understood as the anniversary of the birthday of the trees. And we have a Seder as a tradition that goes back a few hundred years to the mystics who gathered in Tzfat in the 16th and 17th century. The rabbis of that time were very in touch with the world around us and our dependency on the natural world, and also on the cosmos as the setting for the great story playing out of God's creation and of the human beings, and the story we play in this world, and eventually our redemption, our reunification with God. So they took a date that was in the Talmud, in the discussions of the Talmud, the 15th of this month of Shvat, and it was originally a date that marked taxation. Fruits that were in the fields on this date were subject to tax for this year, whereas fruits that appeared after the 15th were subject to taxation in the next year. But for the mystics, this took on a whole new meaning as they sought to understand God's plan for human beings and for this world through looking at nature as a mirror of the divine. Not an obvious mirror, but a mirror in which the hidden meanings that could show us a path, our own paths closer to God, hidden in the world around us. Now, I'm going to share with you my Seder plate. I believe that the folks at Willow Bend and Midtown Park have had Seder plates prepared for you by the kitchen staff. We're not doing a full meal, and this is a relatively brief Seder. We'll aim for this program to be to 60 minutes, including stories and song and a few blessings. But let me show you this beautiful Seder plate, which in my family we use for Passover, but it serves very nicely for Tu B'Shvat as well. I have different various fruits and nuts here on the Seder plate. First, walnuts over here. You don't see the hard shell, but that symbolizes a fruit that comes with a protective shell on the outside. And then the dates over here and the olives over here are fruits where the fruit part that we eat is on the outside and the hard pit is in the center. And then over here on the Seder plate, I have raisins, to something that is through and through what we can eat, and there's no hard exterior or interior. And finally, I have a couple of extra items on the Seder plate, apricots and almonds. So you can follow along with your Seder plates. And I also have a cup of red wine and a cup of white wine, which I will use for the blessings in the 4 different parts of our service. And I will actually have a third cup that I'm going to pour from, a couple of drops of the red. So now, I think the first thing I want to do is begin with a melody, a nigun, a wordless song. And this one I learned when I was in Jerusalem, when I was a student, from a teacher there. And so this is known as the nigun of the trees. It goes like this. Ya da 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 dam, Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 da. 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 Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Da ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 dum. A couple of more things to give you a context about the Seder and Tu B'Shvat in Judaism. It was called originally Pre-Eitz Hadar, the fruit of the beautiful tree. And one of my teachers, Rabbi Everett Gendler, has noted that the ancient world, nature was central to the pagan religions. And so the rabbis may have actually wanted to de-accentuate some of the aspects in Judaism that connect us to nature. The Rosh Chodesh, the new month, the blessings, including Kiddush Levanah, blessing for the new moon, these used to play a much more prominent part in Judaism than they do in the present time. And including the fact that the Rosh Chodesh was a great festive meal, just as Shabbat is a special meal for us today. We don't do that anymore, and we've done away with some of these aspects of the world of nature. You still see some of it, though, say in Sukkot, when we dwell in the booths, which we are commanded, which should be able to see the stars through the roof. That actually puts us out in touch with nature, and a very precious part of our religion. If you've ever experienced spending that time in the sukkah, there's something that nourishes our soul. Another one of my teachers, Rabbi Arthur Green, writes that reading Genesis is like reading a love story of God's love for the world that God creates, including us. And so if we're going to read that faithfully, we need to follow what appears in Genesis in chapter 2. At verse 15, we're told that God put the human being, Adam, into the Garden of Eden to preserve and care for it. So our role as stewards for the world around us appears at the very beginning of Torah. And there are other parts of Torah, including a verse in Deuteronomy, chapter 20, when it talks about Israelites going out to make war on a city and besieging it. The Torah tells us not to cut down trees, particularly trees that bear fruit, because it says are trees human beings that they can withdraw to the city? In other words, there's a mandate to us to respect these beings. I want to begin the Seder with the first of the 4 orders of the Seder, the first of 4 worlds of creation as our mystical forefathers envisioned it. The first world, the world of Asiyah, of doing or of creation, also translated as action, symbolized by the earth, and also noting the separateness of us as creatures on this earth. I'm going to focus on trees, and I have something here I'd like to... This is the world of the physical, of concrete action. the level of earth and in the world of edible plants, fruit with a hard outer shell, thus the walnut. The psychological feeling of this world is one of determination, accomplishment, but also of separateness. The hard shell of the fruit is mirrored in the masks, defenses, and fears which we human beings put up to protect ourselves from the outside world and from other people. The story in the Talmud about Honi, the circle maker. And there's at one point, Honi comes across a man planting a carob tree. And he says, how long is it going to take for this tree to bear fruit? And the man tells him it's going to take 70 years. And Honi believes, well, why do that? Because you're not even going to live to see it. And the point is that the man tells him, I received the benefits of fruit that my ancestors planted for me. And so I'm going to continue this tradition and plant so that my descendants will also be able to partake of the bounties of nature. We have another point from the Vot de Rabbi Natan, which is a collection of Midrash stories. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, if you happen to be holding a sapling and somebody tells you, look, the Messiah is coming, the Messiah is here. Rabbi Yochanan says, and he's one of the great sages of our Jewish tradition, he says, go ahead and plant the sapling, then go and greet the Messiah. The sapling in your hand is that important. Now, at this point, I'm going to show you a film clip about trees, radical and amazing to me. So I hope you enjoy this couple of minutes, about 3 minutes of a clip from PBS.
Okay, walk into a forest and just listen. You can't hear it, but the forest is communicating. And if you've never noticed this before, it's because all of this is happening below your feet. The Wood Wide Web is a network created by fungi. They're called mycorrhizal fungi, and these fungi live in and around the roots of trees and other plants. Now, fungi are a huge domain on the tree of life, and as you've probably noticed by now, nobody knows exactly how you're supposed to say it. Fungi include molds, mushrooms, and yeasts, and as a whole, they're essential to making all of Earth's organic garbage and dead stuff decompose and disappear. While some fungi do resemble plants, they are definitely not plants. They're technically more closely related to animals, but really, fungi are a form of life like no other. These underground fungi are essential to plant survival. They also extend hair-like filaments called hyphae into the soil, which pump water even more efficiently than the tree's own roots. Just like we need our vitamins and minerals to grow, so do trees. Plants from rose bushes to towering redwoods need these micronutrients to survive. And mycorrhizal fungi are efficient little miners. They use acid to bore holes into rocks and fish out nitrogen and phosphorus. Trees release between 20 and 80% of the glucose that they create to their fungal partners. And older trees like the grand poplars and grand maples have more complex fungal interconnections than younger trees. They also form massive branching networks of the fungal threads called mycelium that can extend thousands of acres, connecting entire forests. If you dig into the forest dirt, you may see these thousands of tiny white tubes if you look closely. In a single pinch of dirt, these hyphae, when lined up, can extend 11 kilometers. These networks act as fungal freeways for shipping chemical currencies. The fungi can act like a seasonal bank account for trees, giving loans of sugar if the trees need an extra boost. And scientists have found that if a tree is dying, it will release its extra glucose into the Wood Wide Web, where it can be delivered to younger nearby trees, even trees of a different species. Trees can also use the network to send out warning signals. If insects bite into one tree, it can send a chemical signal through the Wood Wide Web, and when trees deeper in the forest receive this insect alert message, they produce bitter compounds that make their leaves less tasty to the same insects. So, next time you're walking through a forest, take a moment to think about the very small but also very large network that exists under your feet. Just because you can't log on to the Wood Wide Web doesn't mean you aren't connected.
And now, I'd like to offer the two blessings to conclude this first part of our Seder. The first blessing over the walnuts. As we say the blessing, imagine that when one gives praise and thanks for hard-shelled fruit, we remove its protective covering and release the divine sparks in it, and in ourselves, and in the world. Imagine breaking down the shell around you, which separates you and each of us from the world. And the words of the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Blessed art thou, sovereign of the universe, who has created the fruit of the tree. And now we follow our taste of the walnut with that blessing with our cup of white wine or white juice. And the white of the wine or juice symbolizes winter. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Blessed art thou, sovereign of the universe, who has blessed the fruit of the vine. The world of Yitzirah is the world of imagination and the molding and shaping of matter. Its element is water. Although fluid, it shapes the hardest rocks. Its fruits have a soft outside, but a hard pit on the inside. The psychological feeling is one of greater expansiveness and desire to connect, but this may be limited by a closing off of the deepest inner self. I want to bring our attention with a reading to climate change and how that is affecting the world. As climate change increases and the frequency and severity of droughts across this planet, every form of life is affected. For human beings, this not only means less access to drinkable water, but also more chance of famine. Across Africa and Middle East, water crises are partially due to climate change and have helped trigger civil unrest, massive migration, insurgency, and war. Climate change threatens oceans and life. Particularly, we think of coral reefs dying. Teeming with life, coral reefs are the most biologically diverse ecosystems on the planet and home to almost 1/3 of marine fish species. The foundation for a complex web of life, of interdependent species who rely on each other for shelter and food. One of my teachers, Rabbi Gendler, talks about our disconnection from nature and something that he, particularly in his career as a rabbi, has sought to try to bring us back together with nature. Here's something he wrote that strikes me as very powerful. What does it mean to grow up, as increasing numbers of children do today, with so little contact with other growing things? How does it affect personal growth when almost all easily observed rapid developmental paradigms are of other-determined end products, not self-determined growth? What does it mean to have numerous examples of making and processing all around us, but few, if any, examples of that slow, deliberate, self-determined unfolding of inner potential, which is so amazing to watch in the transformation of seed into plant? Separation from the vegetation cycle may have consequences for the spirit that we have hardly begun to comprehend. I want to take you into a story of a couple who were living in Los Angeles. Film photographer, and she was a cook, and they were drawn to go back to the land, to leave behind their city life, and they finally did it. They bought a farm, and it was documented in a movie called The Biggest Little Farm, which is a fabulous movie. I'm going to show you a clip of this. The couple hired a consultant to help them take an abandoned piece of farmland in desolation, very dry, in in California. And they hired a consultant how to begin this process of renewing a farm. He outlined a plan for them that was going to take 7 years. And he emphasized diversification. To put lots of different fruit trees in here. You've got to reestablish the soil, which is all depleted and dried out. And the couple did this, and you'll see in this little clip of the movie how they have just had their first success raising eggs from chickens. And that's something that they can commercially start to make a little bit of money on. There's a whole series of problems. One natural problem crops up after another, and they're stymied what to do. In fact, their consultant and dies of cancer, and they're left in this 7-year course feeling like they were without guidance. We're going to pick it up at a low point when everything seems to be going wrong, including an infestation of insects eating their fruit on the trees, snails eating the leaves from the trees. So the trees are going to bear less fruit. And then what you're going to see here is the pond that they've worked so hard to refresh and restore is suddenly becoming toxic with duck poop from their own ducks and algae, which is blooming off of the duck poop. So see what happens here as the natural world seems to pose one problem after another, and then natural solutions start to present themselves as well.
As the drought continues, there's no fresh rainwater for the pond. And combined with excess nutrients from duck poop, it has caused a toxic algae bloom. Another problem created by us. Everything on this farm must be contributing. And when it's not, what do we do with 100 ducks? I feel like Todd is constantly staring deeply at these almost infinitesimal details. Like he's decoding how the world around him works. So I've started doing the same. And I think I've figured out what ducks love more than ponds. In just a single season, they devoured over 90,000 snails. And better yet, they turned them into fertilizer for the trees. So with every new problem that popped up, I'd first take a step back and watch it. More cows and sheep, more manure. To the fly, this is the food for their babies. Maggots.
Oh, gosh.
But I realized maggots are just more food for chickens. This reduced the fly population to a manageable level of coexistence.
Not like they're just on one section, they're kind of everywhere.
Weevils in the garden, chickens
Observation followed by creativity is becoming our greatest ally.
The life cycle of all things being somehow connected is fascinating and brought to life in that film for me, which is why I've brought it here into our Seder. I also want to go to a short film clip. First, a just brief introduction, and then a 1.5 minute clip from a kibbutz Keturah in the Negev in Israel, which is the site of the Arava Institute of the Desert, which is about 25 years old now. A fascinating place where terrific work on the environment is being done, and a date tree, the fruit of dates from 2,500 years ago, was brought to life by the scientists at Kibbutz Keturah. So here, I'll let you see this for yourself.
The Arava is a desert valley running from the Dead Sea to the Red Sea. It's a very challenging place to do agriculture.
We don't have here much water. The temperature are very hard. It's not easy to grow here.
We're looking for trees or for crops that have a natural potential to grow.
So to grow here in the Arava Valley, it's really something incredible.
Nature truly has no borders. The Arava Institute for Environmental Studies was founded in 1996. Our students come from the West Bank, Jordan, Israel, and internationally. And they study multidisciplinary environmental studies alongside our cross-border research projects.
I have been domesticating trees, perennial plants, taking them from the wild, making them fit for agriculture. And one of the main crops that we thought could have global impact was Argania spinosa.
Argania spinosa is used to produce oil, one of the best edible oils in the world. The need for it, or the demand for it, is very high. Argan
Today is a historic day in which we celebrate the harvest of the first fruit of Hannah, an ancient date tree sprouted from an ancient date seed. This is the result of many years of scientific research at the Arava Institute by Dr. Elaine Soloway.
Here we are with Hannah. She is the female tree that we pollinated from Methuselah's pollen, and she bore us 111 really nice dates with a caramel honey aftertaste. We had a bit of a ceremony in which we cut the dates ceremoniously. Later on, my husband Michael said Shechianu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
And we ceremoniously tasted them.
It really is a symbol of the miracle that we try to perform here at the Arava Institute, bringing people from the Middle East together in order to plant a seed of peace, which we hope will someday sprout into a tree of peace and friendship.
We come to our blessing, the date, the fruit that is soft on the outside with a hard pit inside. And as you taste the soft outer fruit and contact the pit of that fruit, experience those places in yourself which are still hard and inflexible, and meditate on the power of water to break down the hardest stone, and the power of stories, imagination, and love to open the hardest heart. We bless Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. Blessed art thou, sovereign of the universe, who has created the fruit of the tree. And now, we're going to bless a second cup of wine, for which I take the white wine, and I'm just going to add a drop of the red into the cup of white. symbolizing the spring, the beginning of spring, the movement from potential to activation. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. L'chaim. We move now to our third part of the Seder. This is the world of ideas, the natural law inscribed in the patterns of the universe. Its element is air, which is the wind or spirit or breath. Air, in the form of breath, is our connection to the world, to physical and spiritual life. The psychological feeling of this world is interconnectedness. In this world, we eat fruit, which is completely edible. I'm going to show a short film clip, a 4-minute clip, that I also find astounding about the return of the gray wolf, where in 1995 this took place. There had not been wolves in the park for some 70 years. They had been hunted to extinction in that area of the western United States. So this story tells how and why that was important for not just the wolf, but for the whole ecology of the system. I hope that this is inspiring to you.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, that the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately, those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed. More pools formed. More riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transform not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
This film clip shows us this amazing interconnectedness of the world right around us. Sometimes we just don't see it. It takes the work of our fellow human beings who are out in nature all the time, documenting, and scientists to bring this back home to us and bring home some of these truths about the world around us. But on that note, as we've just seen this, let me take you to Psalm 149, and maybe we'll have fresh ears coming from what we've just seen. Hallelujah. Praise Adonai, the breath of life from the heavens. Praise it in the heights. Praise it, you messengers. Praise it, you multitudes. Praise it, sun and moon, and all you light-filled stars. Praise it, heavens beyond the heavens. Praise it, waters beneath the heavens. Praise the name of God, Adonai, breath of life. For though its intertwining all comes to be, each finds its place in the dance of all. Adonai carves them a role that no one can erase. So, sing praise, all that is earthy and grounded, all that flows in the deeps like the great sea monsters. Fire and hail, snow and fog, storm winds blowing from the mouth of God. Lofty mountains, gentle hills, fruit trees and evergreens, roaring beasts and lowing herds, crawly bugs and soaring birds, powerful rulers and empowered peoples, prosecutors and public defenders, men and women sprouting promise, bearded elders bent by life and beardless youth, not yet on path, all sing praise to the breath of life, for it stands alone in radiance, filling with splendor earth and sky, making its people a horn of plenty. For the sake of all who love it, or who come near through wrestling God, let us praise the breath of life. Hallelujah. Praise Yah, the name of God. Now, we turn to the blessing for the soft fruit. I take the raisins, and here's a thought on this fruit that we will bless. As we eat the fruit, meditate on the fact that nothing of the raisin, nothing is wasted. All the fruit is tasty and nourishing. Ben Azai, in the Talmud, used to say, do not be scornful of any person, and do not be disdainful of anything, for there is no person without his or her hour, and no thing without its place. And that's in the sayings of the fathers. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Blessed art thou, sovereign of the universe, who createst the fruit of the vine. For this next cup of wine that we bless, I'm going to take the red wine and put a dash of the white into this, symbolizing the summer, the ripening of fruit, and the balance between potential and fulfillment. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Blessed art thou, sovereign of the universe, who has created the fruit of the vine. A blessing for both the fruit that we've just eaten and the wine. I move on now to the fourth and final part of our Seder for Tu B'Shvat. The sages conceived of this fourth part, the fourth world, they imagined of Atzilut, the world of the Spirit. In the world of the Spirit, the element of fire and light, these define the borders of our physical world. Nothing travels faster than light, and fire is the dynamic messenger which changes all forms, whether to create or to destroy. The feeling of this world is one of unity and intimations of the infinite oneness behind all creation. In this world, we do not eat a fruit, but simply smell the fragrance of a plant, smell being simultaneously the most spiritual and also the oldest, most basic of our senses. And I bring a midrash, which our teachers have in the collection of midrashim on the book of Numbers. It says, "And I will draw upon the spirit which is on you and put it upon them." This is God speaking to Moses. Since Numbers 11, chapter 11, when the 70 elders started to prophesy among the people, the question the Midrash asks, since the spirit of prophecy in the elders was drawn from Moses, do you suppose that Moses' own prophecy was diminished? In no way, they answer. To what may Moses be compared at that moment? To a lamp that is a light. Though many lamps are lit from it, still its own light is not at all diminished. The issue that I want to bring to folks' attention is the fact that the rainforests of the Amazon have been burning. Climate change is creating such fires across the globe. And as it does that, we see more and more carbon going into the atmosphere, more and more an acceleration of the heating of our planet. Our work is before us. We cannot shirk. We have to do something before we let our planet burn up from our consumption of fuel and the fires that are raging out of control. I have a story that I want to bring in to this fourth part of the Seder. Climate activism. I've highlighted some of the issues that you're all familiar with that I brought in here, affecting the world around us and our environment in potentially devastating, catastrophic ways. I now want to share a video clip of a colleague, a schoolmate of mine who's a rabbi up in Massachusetts, connected with the seminary, the Rabbinical School of Hebrew College. Her name is Shoshana Meir Friedman. She has worked with other clergy to create a movement. Rabbi Shoshana built an alliance in Roxbury, Massachusetts. So let's take a look at that video clip. And the theme of this is passion for climate activism that we need to support to help lead and be an example for all of our communities around the globe so we can preserve this heritage of a bountiful earth which God has given to us.
We are united clergy across different traditions. We don't have the same exact doctrines or the same exact rituals, but together we believe that God and the Spirit call us to stand for justice, so we are doing that united this morning. Amen.
On May 25th, 2016, the first thing that we did after doing a lot of singing was we took out a Torah scroll. And I read from the second paragraph of the Shema, which is one of the essential prayers in Judaism. And this paragraph in the book of Deuteronomy says, If you listen to me and obey my commandments, I will send you rain in the proper times, and you and your animals will have enough to eat. But if you don't listen and you turn your hearts away and you worship false gods, then I will shut up the sky and there will be no rain. And it was incredibly powerful to read that in the biblical Hebrew straight from the scroll while blocking the entrance to this work site. We walked down the street singing. And then we came across the spot in the construction barrier where the inspectors workers were digging, and I grabbed the hand of Reverend Fred Small, who's a friend and colleague of mine in this work, and we ducked across the street and went underneath the thin construction barrier. And within a few seconds, all 16 of us had ducked under.
I'm Jim Antle. I'm a United Church of Christ minister. I lead the United Church of Christ here in Massachusetts, and this is my grandson.
My name is Rajesh Kasturi Rangan. I'm a Hindu and I'm a scientist and I'm a father. I'm here because it is 124 degrees in parts of the world that I come from.
I felt a sense of elation and relief because I had been planning this action for so long at that point, and I so wanted it to work. And so I was so glad to get under there. About half an hour later, when the officer knelt down and asked me to stand up, and I said, as we had been trained to say, "Am I under arrest?" And he said yes. And it is not something that most people feel when they hear that they're under arrest. I'm very conscious of the privilege inherent in that moment. I was being treated well by the police, but I felt this wash of just joy and pride because that was the moment that I'd been waiting for. And from then on, it was going to be out of my hands, but I would have done what I came there to do.
Speak for me. The work I've done. Speak for me. When I'm resting here, I'm
There was something very profound about being in that jail cell. For at least an hour of my life, like my whole body was in this fight. Unfortunately, we lost the fight to stop the West Roxbury lateral, and it hurts my heart that that pipeline went through. I'm still very proud of the work that we did. Thinking about what is success in a movement like the climate movement is a very important question, and it's one that I spend a lot of time trying to wrap my heart around because it's not simple. We lost the fight to keep the pipeline out of the ground, but there's success in the human resistance to, let's say, the disease of climate change. There was an immune system response to a parasite in a neighborhood. It would have been even more of a moral failure for this to have gone in without a fight. It's a failure from a standpoint of physics that it went in, but from the standpoint of the human spirit and building a movement that says, you know what, the world is ending on our watch, but we're not going to go silent with it. We are going to put our vision to work in our bodies and do what we can to at least show that there is resistance to this disease and that there is not just resistance, but a move towards health.
This is where we are called to be. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called.
I haven't got a separate fragrant herb to partake of the aroma, but I'm going to use the olives here. These olives have a little aroma to them, and I'm going to say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Blessed art thou, sovereign of the universe, who has created the fruit of the tree. Not only smelling it, I'm going to take a taste. For the blessing on the fourth cup of wine, we bless red wine. I mentioned I had a third cup. I'm going to use this to pour in some red, just red this time. But the first was just white. The second was white with a touch of red. The third cup was red with a touch of white. And for this fourth blessing over the wine, I bless a cup of red, symbolizing harvest and autumn, also our determination and our ability to do the things that God has set us to do, to preserve and keep the garden that God gave to us. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. L'chaim. I'm going to close with one other beautiful song another rabbi has created, a melody for words of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who lived 300 years ago. And you may know Gesher Tsar Me'od, the whole world is a narrow bridge, but the important thing is not to be afraid. I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Yosef Goldman for this concluding piece. Thank you for joining me. May you be blessed on this Tu B'Shvat and your families with health and safety in this time of pandemic that we're still coming and fighting to get through. And may you be impassioned to become part of the tide rising to help preserve the environmental beauty of this world that we have been gifted by God to preserve and keep. Shalom, everybody.
גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם הוא גשר צר, כל העולם כולו. גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם הוא גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם הוא גשר צר, כל העולם כולו. גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם הוא גשר והעיקר, לא לפחד כבר, לא לפחד גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם הוא גשר צר, כל העולם כולו. גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם הוא גשר והעיקר, לא לפחד כבר, לא לפחד והעיקר,
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Jojo. Want to put this on me? All right. Can you say Happy Tu B'Shvat to everybody at Legacy?
Happy Tu B'Shvat, everybody. I made these necklaces for the whole family.
All right.
And I even have this like aerial ring.
Okay.
It goes the other way, I guess. Bye.
Thank you.
See my aerial ring again?
Joe, do you want to take the last apricot with you?
Oh, please.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Close the door. Thanks a lot.